Overwatch came out in May 2016, which means this game is about to turn 10 years old, which is a very long time for a live service game. But it was not just Overwatch, because in 2022 they released the sequel, Overwatch 2, except this game doesn't exist anymore. It's not an understatement to say that Overwatch took the world by storm when it released, getting insane sales, winning Game of the Year award and getting praised by everyone in the gaming community, including people who don't really care about playing competitive FPS games. And when it comes to me, even though I wasn't playing Overwatch back then because me and my friends were on other games, as a fan of Warcraft universe and Blizzard's iconic cinematics, I instantly became a huge fan of Overwatch universe. The character designs and their stories just did it for me, and I was keeping an eye on the game ever since, playing it casually a bit and then getting into its competitive side with the release of Overwatch 2. They hit a goldmine with this game. Overwatch at the time reminded everyone that Blizzard still got it, and in Blizzard's tradition, as the years went on, they fucked everything up. It's hard to find a more tragic self-sabotage story in gaming. Overwatch went from a beloved IP to an absolute shitshow that every person with a social media account clowned on. And for many reasons, it was deserved. The game lost a lot of its core player base over the years, but surprisingly, the game is still around, and it's far from being dead, just like it's far from its glory days. I love Overwatch as a world with tons of lore and as a competitive multiplayer shooter, and that's exactly why I want to root for it. So the question of this video is it even possible? Does Overwatch still have a chance to become a better game than it ever was? And most importantly, to convince the gaming community at large that it's a game worth caring about. I think to have a discussion about the future of Overwatch, we have to talk about its past and how we went from the release of Overwatch 2 to now them changing the name back to just Overwatch. The last couple years for Overwatch 1 were rough. People were basically playing this game with little to no updates, no new heroes, no significant balance changes to shift the meta. It was basically abandoned at this point, but it was alright because we knew that they are developing a massive sequel that will bring us new characters, new maps and game modes, and of course a highly replayable lore-packed PvE mod that would move the story forward. And the player base was patiently waiting for this tiny multi-billion-dollar corporation to deliver on their promises. So Overwatch 2 came out, we got 3 new heroes, a new game mode that everybody hated with 2 maps, and 5v5 instead of 6v6 with no PvE inside. That was a release not worthy of a sequel. The game came out lacking new content and 5v5 didn't work back then. And I do think that 5v5 works now, but we will get to that later. There was simply no justification for that release, but once again the community stayed passionate because PvE was still coming and a lot of people were excited about that. So whenever people were trashing on Overwatch 2, a lot of players, myself included, were explaining that the whole reason for this sequel is the PvE mode. It was Jeff Kaplan's vision all this time.
Look, if you see that Kaplan kid, tell him to stop joyriding in my golf cart. Because I know it was him!
So most likely they're working on it, making sure it releases in a good state. And then the 9/11 of Overwatch happened. After months of literal radio silence from developers, we are getting a message that basically everything that people were waiting for was scrapped. No PvE mod is coming. For many, it was their last straw with this company, and they are completely justified to feel that way. It was a literal spit in the face of the entire community. The only reason for a sequel to exist was just gone. You could say that this moment was Overwatch letting out its last breath, but that's where I would disagree. Blizzard is a horrific company. They had so many scandals, so much mismanagement and out-of-touch decisions. I don't think I have to explain to you that Bobby Kotick is a horrible CEO who is the person to blame in all of this. There are multiple stories of him forcing the team to work on projects over time for him to just cancel everything later. Maybe if not for his management, Overwatch wouldn't fall so far down. However, he is now gone from the company after Activision Blizzard was sold to Microsoft in 2023. Some thought that it's a great thing for Overwatch and some were skeptical of things changing, and I'm not trying to say that Microsoft is some sort of an angel. They basically went from super hell to just hell. But honestly, with the way things have been moving since, I do believe that Overwatch started slowly healing after that. But it's not just because of them being under Microsoft now. I think the biggest part of that is the people behind the game. I need you to understand something. The team that's working on Overwatch right now is almost entirely different from what it once was. Jeff Kaplan is gone, and so is his vision for the game. But that doesn't mean that the current team behind Overwatch doesn't care. And as a matter of fact, they made me believe that they are working very hard to make this game as good as it can be, despite their many fuck-ups over the last couple years that I am going to talk about.
I can see the headlines now. Prominent Omnic film director found dead in own limo. Cause of death? Gross incompetence.
The most obvious change going into Overwatch 2 was changing 6v6 to 5v5. 1 tank, 2 DPS, 2 supports. This change was not met well by most players. People wanted the tank synergies. They wanted to play Ryan Zarya on King's Row. They wanted DPS Doomfist. 5v5 was probably one of the biggest reasons people stopped playing Overwatch, at least it was for tank players. And I can't blame them. They made the decision to swap to 5v5 without meeting the necessary requirements at the time. They had an idea of how it's supposed to work, but the execution was just not there. Having only one tank on the battlefield makes it way too obvious who to focus. And because they gigabuff tanks, taking the player out basically meant you won the fight. Every cooldown button was targeted at tanks, every DPS was shooting them non-stop, and there was no second tank to peel for you. You don't have a Zarya to bubble you don't have a Sigma there to put up a shield. Long story short, tank gameplay was miserable. It also kind of ruined support, because having only one big target who takes damage means you either pump your heals into them the entire game praying that they take cover, or your tank plays cover, meaning you have all the time in the world to just shoot the enemy team, which makes supports a lot more valuable. But then as well, if your Ana gets jumped by Winston and you have Reinhardt somewhere in front shielding himself, you don't have anyone to turn around and save her ass. As you can see, taking out one player changes how everything plays out, and they just didn't put enough thought into how to actually make it balanced. The problem is, it's not just balance being fucked up, it's the lack of feedback from developers. I think at the start of Overwatch's new life cycle, the team was not experienced enough, including balancing team. And the big part of why I actually believe Overwatch has a chance to be saved is how they changed and adapted over the years. They started communicating with us a lot more over the last 2 years, addressing issues and player feedback, and then actually making meaningful changes. Aaron Keller, the current director of Overwatch, also went from being kind of a faceless figure to writing big messages to the community in his director takes, explaining in detail his thoughts on the current state of Overwatch and their plans going forward. I actually really like that he puts those out, and I always read them. He also started appearing in videos addressing game-related stuff directly, and I would say that now I can truly see him as the director behind Overwatch. So the biggest thing they decided to do, in my opinion, are big updates at the start of each year. Those are not just tiny patch notes. With those updates, they actually change fundamentally how the game works and give it a much needed refresh to make it exciting again. The first year was the global rework of health pools and hero passives, as well as a ranked system, which people complained a lot about. As I said, 5v5 was not balanced on release, but this was the first step to make it playable. Let me explain what the idea behind 5v5 even is from my understanding. I think that the reason they wanted to make 5v5 is to make a game where individual impact of each player matters way more compared to 6v6. In 6v6, team play was extremely important, especially when you have 6 ultimate abilities to account for. And I'm not trying to say that it doesn't matter in 5v5, obviously coordination is still extremely important, it's a team game after all. But you do have more space for your individual performance to matter. And let's be real, that's probably going to be better for most players who play solo queue with randoms. That's the main benefit of 5v5, and that's the reason I like it. As we already established, roles in the game didn't feel right. Tanks were exploding, supports were too easy to dive with no protection, and DPS just kind of felt useless and boring because shooting tanks was just the most optimal play, but didn't feel rewarding whatsoever. That's how role passives became a thing. Tanks got reduced critical hit damage to make them less vulnerable to infinite poke. DPS got a healing reduction passive which actually made them feel impactful in fights, rewarding smart target priority, and supports got quick self-heal out of combat, which rewarded players for playing carefully and taking cover, which is great because the most impactful thing you can do as a support is to stay alive for as long as possible. Along with this change, they reworked hero pools, making the standard HP 250 instead of 200, and now that gives them more tools to balance heroes. If you have a character like Cass who has little to no mobility, 250 feels perfectly right for him, but when you have a highly mobile character like Juno, Juno, you can just cut off 25 HP from her, making her easier to kill when players can actually land their shots. In that season they also made hitboxes bigger though, so hitting targets did become easier to do, but it's been so long I honestly don't remember how aiming felt before that change. Season 9 was the first moment where I thought, damn, this whole Overwatch 2 thing might work out if they just keep adjusting the game like that. But even if you don't agree with me whatsoever on 5v5 balancing philosophy, they answered community's request and brought 6v6 back. It has quite a dedicated player base, so you can still enjoy the game that way if that's what you prefer. The second big yearly update was after Marvel Rivals came out, and that's when Overwatch got its first serious competitor in years, and I don't think I have to explain to you how beneficial it is for us, players. That update was arguably even more important for the game's future, because that's where perks were introduced. Every hero in the game got a minor and major perk unique to their kit that you can obtain throughout the match, and this was a complete game changer. They proved to me that their current structure of releasing updates each year to change how the game plays completely works. This was so refreshing for the game and made it feel fun again, actually switching up how you play every character. But obviously perks weren't perfect on release. Ideally you want both major perks to be very impactful to your playstyle, and the choice between them shouldn't be obvious. It has to depend on your comp, the enemy comp, the map you're playing, etc. Some perks on release were either overpowered or useless, and that's why developers decided to revisit their big yearly changes halfway through the year, after they gathered enough data, and make big necessary adjustments. And that's what happened with perks. They did quite a good job reworking them, in my opinion, even though it wasn't perfect. In that update, they also released Stadium, a completely new MOBA-like game mode that they promised to put a lot of effort into. And I made a video on it back then, but honestly it was not a great video, so you shouldn't watch it. Long story short, it's a fun little game mode that was enjoyable for a while for me, but I just don't see myself playing it over something like Deadlock. This game mode has its players, but I can't see it becoming a dominant game mode that people would play over a standard comp. Maybe they can do something with it in the future, I mean they update it constantly, but I'm not that interested in it personally. And now we're in 2026 and the new update is about to release, once again absolutely changing the game for this entire year. I'm writing this script before the update is out, but the video will most likely drop after the new season starts, so feel free to tell me in the comments if all of my predictions were wrong and the game is an unplayable piece of garbage right now. But to be honest, I'm extremely excited to hop back on the game right now. All the story related stuff I will discuss in the next part of this video. So for now let's focus on gameplay and what the new update will bring to the game. Let's address the elephant in the room first. They are dropping 5 new heroes right away as soon as the new season starts. 1 tank, 2 supports and 2 DPS, basically an entire team comp. And then they release 1 new hero each season throughout this year. Remember when Overwatch 1 wasn't getting any new heroes for like 3 years? Well, we are getting 10 new characters in 2026. Let's forget about balance for a second and just admit that it was much needed. If Overwatch wants to keep up with games like Marvel Rivals, they had to speed up the release of new heroes. And I did not expect them to go all out, but they certainly did, and I'm happy about it. Now, what that would mean for the balance is hard to tell, but the reason I'm not too worried about it is something I haven't mentioned yet, which is hero bans, a system they added to the game and honestly should have been there from the start. Even if they fuck up and some character is overtuned, community can always be at ease knowing that this character will get perma-banned every game until developers fix them. So I think we should just be happy about getting a bunch of new heroes, some of which have been concepts for years. Besides heroes, we will also get new maps and reworks of some old maps. I personally don't care too much for new maps, I think we have enough in the game as is, and I'm more excited about them coming back to change some older maps. They also teased changing some kits for older characters, and I would love for some legacy heroes to get reworks. It's so strange to get all those new heroes with new and complicated loaded kits when we still have Cassidy who kind of just shoots his gun and rolls around. A lot of those abilities are outdated, and I would love to see some beloved heroes get a new identity, gameplay wise. And of course I have to mention them doubling down on role passives to make the balance even more layered, because now every role is broken down in 3 different sub-roles, and each one of those sub-roles has a unique passive, which adds even more nuance to every role, and we love to see that. I am more confident in Overwatch devs than ever before. I think they managed to make 5v5 work, and I hope they can keep up this pace and make the game feel fresh every year. But it's enough about balance, let's talk about another important part of the game.
Aliens, rocket ships, and a human with a gun. Audiences never change. God bless them.
Lore is one of the most problematic parts of current Overwatch, mostly because we have infinite amounts of it, but we are given none of that shit. PvE got cancelled, but we did end up getting some story missions, and to sum up, they were simply underwhelming. First of all, they were a separate purchase, which already turned a lot of people off trying those out. And all you got was shooting bots in the practice range with no replay value that was promised to us. It honestly felt like they just kind of threw whatever breadcrumbs they had to the community and called it a day. Whether you cared about PvE or not, at this point we will have to accept that it's not the way this story will progress. But maybe there is some hope left. Another thing they announced at the latest Overwatch Spotlight is switching to chapters. Kind of like Fortnite, I guess. Each chapter will last a year and contain 6 seasons, covering one story arc. The current arc is called Reign of Talon, and it's all centered around Vendetta defeating Doomfist and taking over his orc, which was certainly something people weren't too happy about. Listen, a new character appearing and defeating an older, well-established character is not the most absurd thing ever, and I do think people are significantly overreacting, and I'm convinced that players would react differently if her release wasn't so recent. If anything, I'm happy that we finally got a new hero who actually has a significant importance in the current lore, instead of an edgy teenager who committed genocide using the sun. Alright, while we are on it, let me quickly give my thoughts on all the new characters that were added to the game since Overwatch 2 and what I think about them story-wise and gameplay-wise, as well as my thoughts on their design philosophy overall. Let's start with Sojourn. She's a DPS hero who was formerly a captain in Overwatch. I like her a lot. I don't think we got enough characters in Overwatch 2 who are actually related to Overwatch, so her addition is very welcomed in my opinion. When it comes to gameplay, she was initially extremely busted, with her railgun deleting people across the entire map. She was basically a Widowmaker who had to play a little minigame to charge up her shot by shooting the tank and then use one of the most insane movement abilities in the DPS role to just slide on you and commit first-degree murder. She's in a lot more balanced spot right now, even though I do think her perks are kind of busted. But she's one of the better additions to the game in my opinion. Then we got Junker Queen, the ruler of Junker Town. She's cool, I like her personality and she has her significance in the world. She also has one of the most unique designs out of all the new heroes. They nailed it with her. When it comes to her gameplay, I think she is one of the most fun tanks in the game. Her knife is a displacement tool that is not too easy to land on squishes and it never feels unfair to play against. Her axe is also awesome. One of my favorite balance changes they made was make its cooldown faster for each player she hits with it. Overall, great character. Now, the fucking Thanos, Kiriko. I have a lot of issues with Kiriko. Let's start with lore, because she is so powerful she broke time and space. So supposedly Kiriko was training alongside Hanzo and Genji when all of them were kids. The problem is Kiriko is 21, Genji is 37, which means he would be 16 when Kiriko was a newborn baby. Apart from her breaking the timeline, her personality just pisses me off, which doesn't make sense because in her hero trailer she seemed sweet and nice, but then she also showcased she can be badass. In game, however, she is just the most annoying millennial writing teenager you've ever seen. And now, her gameplay. She received many nerfs over the years, but oh my god, she was easily the best character in the game when she came out, and it was not even close. And even though she's in a much better spot now, I still think she's overkitted, especially compared to Overwatch 1 supports. She can teleport through walls to any of her teammates, giving her an easy escape option or an extremely fast engage tool to follow up on dives. She could 2-tap you across the map with her very fast projectiles. At least she can't do that now. Her cleanse can cancel out most abilities and ults in the game, not only cleansing all the negative effects but also giving invincibility frames. And this skill is not that hard to hit, especially when you just need to save yourself. Her ultimate is also one of the best in the game. On release it was absolutely busted, and of course on top of all that she can climb walls to easily achieve high ground without wasting her TP. Don't get me wrong, I think she's fun to play, she just does too much of everything. Kiriko is clearly their money printing machine as well. They decided to throw Tracer in the trash bin and make her the poster child of Overwatch. She is getting all the skins every season, but you know, they have to make money, so whatever. Ramatra is one of my favorite characters in terms of lore. We finally got another Omni character, even though we still have just 2, which is so weird to me. But it looks like we will finally get a DPS Omni this year. Thank God. Ramatra is a powerhouse. He is a revolutionary who has easily the coldest monologues in the entire roster. All of that is cool and stuff, but his gameplay signifies a big problem that we have with new tanks in Overwatch 2, which is blocking. His kit overall, I'd say, is interesting, but every time he was meta and every time he was picked in pro play was because of his block ability, which is just not an interesting way to design damage negation. It's not fun for the person playing the character to just hold right click the entire fight and stand there unkillable because it's the most optimal thing to do, and it's also not fun to shoot invincible Ramatra who is getting healed by both supports. It's also an ability on resource meter, which also indicates another problem I have with hero design in Overwatch 2, which is the lack of commitment. Roadhog heal ability used to be an ability you press and then it goes on cooldown. If you're missing a bit of health, it might not be worth to waste it. However, now it's on resource meter, meaning he can hit his wave whenever he wants and then not be punished for it. I just don't like that style of balancing the hero, and there is another tank we'll get to that has the same issue. Next hero we got is Lifeweaver, and they did have somewhat an interesting concept with his pull ability and petal, a support with a new utility which is giving your teammates another movement option or pulling them out of danger. Sounds cool on paper, but he turned out to be quite a throw pick. His gun was completely useless on release, so he was just heal-botting the entire match, and his abilities didn't provide something a hero like Lucio couldn't. They did make like 100 changes to that character since, and I think he's more viable now, especially considering his perks, but I still think it was a miss. He's funny though, don't think he added anything interesting to lore, but his personality and interactions with other characters is quite cool. And he ended up being one of the most memeable characters in the game, so I'd say he found his spot in the roster. Next up is Iyari, who might be my least favorite character in the entire game. First of all, she's just hella annoying, edgy teenager. I don't know why I should care about her committing genocide, she's just so boring in all of her voice lines. And then her actual kit is the most boring poke playstyle you could ever imagine. Just place a turret somewhere, doesn't take a lot of effort, and then just shoot enemies non-stop while periodically beaming your tank with heals. And then she also got a movement ability that denies dives on her most of the time. Just an extremely boring addition to the game if you ask me. And then, oh god, we got Mauga. I think it's safe to say that Mauga broke Overwatch. His design was so flawed, it's crazy to me he came out like this. It's a tank character designed to shoot the enemy tank hero and do nothing else. That's what he excels at, and he doesn't really provide much more. He has a healing aura that provides heals for dealing damage, and it does work on your teammates, but it's much more beneficial to just press it whenever you're shooting the enemy tank by yourself. Mirror matches with that character were the most brain-dead meta in Overwatch history, and no matter how much they change him, he will always stay a poorly designed hero. But at least he has a fun personality and some actual lore significance, I guess. Next character is where I think they started making better characters gameplay-wise, and it's Venture. I personally don't like playing Venture, they are not my favorite hero, but their kit is actually creative and brought something new to the DPS role. I know a lot of players hate to go up against that hero because Venture could be quite annoying, but I would argue that it's one of the most fair characters they added who doesn't feel overtuned, at least currently. I do also think that Venture is kind of in the same boat as Iyari. It's a character who kind of just came out of nowhere, has no relationship with anyone from the game and not much significance in the overarching plot. And even though I like their aloof personality, they're just kind of there for the vibes. I also want to make something clear. Not every character has to have big impact on the story, but when you add too many characters like that, it just feels like we are in no way progressing towards anything in this world. And it's not fun for me. I think it's fine to add a character like Jetpack Cat who is coming this season. That type of character is just goofy as hell and works as someone who doesn't influence the story. But when you release too many characters like that, it just kind of feels a bit cheap. I feel the same way about Juno. I really like her personality and I think her kit is well designed and fun. Apart from her torpedoes, it's kind of a stupid ability that auto-aims for you and doesn't require any skill impression for how much value it provides. But at least Juno has some actual chemistry with other characters. She's relatives with Mei, and Lucio apparently taught her how to play football. Now we got Hazard, a dive tank whose playstyle I do like somewhat, but he's another example of a character who is completely overtuned for no reason. He has a leap that works as a movement ability and deals damage. He can put up a wall that provides cover or blocks out chokes while also damaging whoever touches it. He has a fucking block ability that mitigates damage and deals damage to everyone in front of him, and you don't even have to aim it. Oh, and he can also wall climb. Let's just give him every ability in the game at this point. I think they made a character who is fun to play, unlike Mauga, but he's just completely overkitted, and I think they could go easier with his abilities. And I don't even know what his lore is, I don't give a fuck. After him we got Freya, a flying DPS, first character to use crossbow as a weapon, and I think she is quite cool to play, even though the amount of burst damage she can deal at almost any distance while also being extremely mobile is a bit ridiculous in my opinion. Seriously, does every character in the game need so much movement? Can we get more characters who are actually easily punishable for being out of position? Jesus Christ. Lore-wise, I don't care about her at all. She's a bounty hunter, former Overwatch member, but I don't think her personality carries her. She's kind of boring as hell. Wuyong is next up. He's a water college student. Yeah, I just don't care for his origin story. Wuyong's biggest foe is the guilt he feels over disappointing his parents. Widowmaker had to kill her fucking husband. Can we write something more dramatic, please? Apart from his not so interesting story, I think he might be one of the best characters they released for the game. First, he has a very unique left click, launching water orbs that you can control with your mouse, meaning he can hit targets around corners, and landing direct hits deals a shit ton of damage. Maybe a bit too much with perks. His heal is like a combination of Mercy Beam with Zenyatta's Orb, and his wave amplifies heals as well as displacing enemies a bit, which makes him great at peeling for his other support. And because of that, he fills the role of main support, which is something you don't have to care about if you don't pay attention to the pro scene, but he's a very welcomed addition to the game's roster in my opinion. I already briefly spoke about Vendetta and how happy I am that we finally got a character who moves the story forward, but she also might be my favorite character they added. A hyper-mobile true melee character is something we didn't really have before. She also has a block on resource meter, but this time they actually balanced it well. It's not based on time you hold the button. Shooting her block is what drains the resource meter, which makes shooting her while she's blocking actually rewarding, because you leave her with no defense. Her left click combo ends in an overhead strike that has quite a fair hitbox and is not too easy to hit. And her only ranged option is a slow projectile that takes precision to hit on mid to long range. Developers had a hard time finding their footing with those character releases, and they certainly had rough final results, but I do think they are improving each year, making better and better characters. One of the new heroes that we got to playtest and run is actually a lot of fun to play and feels fair, even though she has a problem that I haven't talked about yet, which is character design. Overwatch has a pretty face syndrome. Every character has to be a cutie patootie and sell skins, otherwise they're not cool for the game apparently. Look at Juno compared to Unrun and tell me it's not the same fucking face. It's getting a bit absurd now. Update: Overwatch Count actually posted a TikTok where Aaron Keller says that they are going to redesign Unrun's model in-game because of players' feedback. You see what I'm talking about now? You see what I mean? Vendetta has one of the cooler looking designs in my opinion, but for someone who is battling in the Coliseum their entire life, she should have at least some battle scars. And the new Jetpack Cat hero, I was really happy that we are finally getting a non-human character, but why the fuck even she has eyelashes? If Overwatch wants their characters to have unique identities, they gotta start working on more creative designs that don't look so stale. And that's one of my biggest hopes for the future. Coming back to Vendetta, she's been very fun to play, and hopefully she will signify a new era for Overwatch 2, or just Overwatch. When Overwatch 2 came out, people were pissed about them claiming it's a game worthy of a sequel. They were saying that it should have been marketed as a big update to Overwatch, and 2 should have never been in the title, and that's a valid criticism. But now when they decided to step away from the 2 in the title, people are still clowning on them on social media, saying that there was no point to put 2 in the title to begin with, and They are right. Something that a lot of people don't take into account is how much power higher-ups have on branding and things related to money printing. I already mentioned before that Blizzard's management was never the best, and I can guarantee you the only reason 2 was there is because they thought it would be a great way to sell people on the idea of a new game, and in classical fashion for out-of-touch executives, they ended up digging a grave for themselves. Did Overwatch deserve all the hate it received over the last couple years? Most likely the answer is yes. Does it mean that there is no chance that people who work on Overwatch can't make it a significantly better game? Fuck no. I criticized a lot of the decisions made by developers in this video, but it doesn't mean that I can't see how much work they've put into improving Overwatch, and people often refuse to give them credit for any good change they made. And if it keeps going like that, Overwatch will never climb out of the pit it is in. People need to understand that it's a game still full of life, and it's not just some money printing machine, even though it is a money printing machine. I mean, that's just how business works. But still, this year is going to be packed with content, and I'm very excited for what they are going to make. And hopefully more people decide that it's a game that doesn't deserve negative ratings anymore. Them stepping away from the 2 in their title is good news, if you ask me. Overwatch can keep going as a single game it was already supposed to be. And even though the probability of it is low, getting an animated show would do wonders for this game, I swear. If Arcane was able to convince people that League is a great IP, then it could work for Overwatch for sure. If you enjoyed me spitting out my thoughts, consider subscribing to this channel, by the way. Oh, and also remove scoreboards. Looking at numbers makes people focus on the wrong thing and not actually pay attention to what's happening in the game, and then they decided they lost the game 4 minutes into the match, and it's just